And let me just get down here where people are going to end up with stiff necks. Stay there. How do I get, because the blood knot, which is going to be the play I direct in a few weeks' time, it's only got 2 characters. And the first performance of the blood knot, I will have you know, in Johannesburg. And you must remember I wrote it when I was still learning the craft. Lasted for 4 hours. Wow. That audience nearly lynched me. And then I learned that, the first thing any young writer does is overwrite. And so I learned to cut it down. And what I'll be doing in New York is runs a decent length of there'll be an interval, about an hour on one side and an hour on the other side, 2 hours. How do I do it? Well, first we're talking about a tool, aren't we? And it also talks, you see, the denser you make a character, the more substance there is to the life of this fictional creation of yours, the longer you're going to be able to keep him going or her going on a stage. Do you understand? If you just create a character very superficially, creating a sort of a stereotype of the good man or the bad woman or whatever it is, you're going to run out of words, as you say, before half an hour. But if you've given that character a real life, now take Bushman and Lena. When I started to write Bushman and Lena, it wasn't a question just of a bullying, drunk, coloured man and the woman he lives with or is married to or whatever, covered with bruises. It begins. I asked myself, what are their histories? What have they done? Was there a moment when they actually loved each other? Because when we see them in the play I wrote, their language is violence, and the language of love, of tender caressing, has been replaced by, insults, bruises. And as the play goes on to do, Bushman even doesn't kill the black man, but he even goes to work on the body of a black man, kicking it, because the bastard has complicated his life now by lying there dead. It's the depth you give a character. The depth you give a character, and also, most important of all, and here comes the next thought, which, might... There's got to be a secret. Not one of you in this room hasn't got a secret. No, that's true. And that's an incredibly empowering factor in any life. It's what drives us more than anything else. I've shared one of my secrets with you about my problem, my conflict, and I haven't done it until recently, my conflict having a white father who I loved but couldn't respect, and a black man who I knew was inferior to me, but who I wanted to be like him. That was my struggle. There was an internal conflict in me that made me do what I had to do, and what I went on to do in the play Master Harold and the Boys. And it's the same with Bushman. Bushman's secret. Does anybody want to venture what Bushman's secret is? Does anybody know? Anybody who studied this play? No. Bushman's secret is that he hates himself. He'll never admit it until he's drunk enough at that night on the mud flats. He then finally says to Lena, "We're rubbish. We're rubbish. Look at us. We eat the white man's rubbish. We wear the white man's rubbish. We build our pondok with the white man's rubbish, our shack with the white man's rubbish. We are rubbish." And it's that scathing hatred of himself, because he knows that as a human being there's some blunted dream in his brain which tells him you actually deserve to be beautiful. And he gets hold of one word and he can't let it go. There's this word he gets hold of finally, rambling as he does in his stupor, drunken stupor. He finds the word freedom. He doesn't know what the hell that word means, but it brings up a vision of a life different to the one he lives in. Yeah. You see how those things drive him, lash him into viciousness. And what can he do? What is there in his life that he can deal with and hit other than Leonard? Nothing. The white man hits him, and he wants to hit something. He can't hit the white man. Bushman, you're in big trouble. You try to do that. But there's Lena, his wife. So he hits her. He abuses her. That's the way it is. And you want to read this newspaper carefully. You'll see how many stories are about men writhing in self-disgust and hatred with themselves and taking it out on their women, killing their families, shooting up everybody. You're with me? Good. Thanks for the question.
Yes. I want to know what, has religion or spirituality played a role in your journey? And if you answer yes, I want to know how it has shaped the way that you view human beings and what a human being is. Please.
Okay. I should have got my professor of theology along with me to answer that one. But I'll tell you, I'll give you an answer from myself about religion. I was brought up in the Anglican Church, and it left no impression on me. Particularly, I sang in the choir, can you believe that? I sang in the choir, and what actually destroyed my religion wasn't something I did, but it was the fellow next to me in the choir stalls where we used to sing. And he had a bad cold one day, and he tore out the last page of the Bible to blow his nose. Yeah. And I thought, wow. And I'm waiting for God to send down a bolt of lightning and strike him dead. But the bolt of lightning never came. Now, I'm not making it, I know it's a joke, but it's a kind of, that's the sort of things that worked on me and led me finally, I wonder if you'll appreciate another little story I have. A journalist was interviewing me. My daughter is now 40-odd years old, 40. No, there's nothing odd about the year, just 40 plus something. Came to where we were living. This was quite a long time. My daughter was about 7 or 8 years. And the journalist had spoken to me during lunch, during the morning. And then we were having a little bit of lunch. And he turned to my daughter and he said, now, Lisa, that is her name, your mother is a Buddhist, which my wife is, very serious, committed Buddhist. She started off as a Catholic, but finally found that there were problems for her and discovered Buddhism and has pursued that path and is an extraordinary example of peace and harmony. She's amazing. Your mother's a Buddhist. You are a Catholic because my daughter was born. My wife was still a Catholic in the church. What is your father? So she said, I know what he is. I know Daddy's told me what he is. And she said, yes, I've got the word now. And she said, Daddy is an agnosaurus. It's a gorgeous word, eh? Isn't that a good word?
Oh, wow.
We're very proud of her. I'm very proud of her. But anyway, so I don't know. I don't know. That's what agnostic means. I don't know. I don't know if there is. I don't know if there isn't. I don't know if there's a power above us or if there isn't a power above us. I know that I have what I would call a religious impulse inside myself, but I can't define it. It involves, among other things, I learn more from nature than I do from people, from human beings or teachers, so-called teachers. A tree. I mean, I walk back to my apartment from Stias, and there is one tree and that tree and I have got to know each other. He is a big, beautiful oak. My God, he's so big, and the life that is growing around him and out of him, he doesn't even know what it feels like to be, those parts of his body anymore. He just stands there in such magnificence. And there's an incredible lesson in that for me. I know it's a lesson. I don't know if you ever hugged a tree or not, but I always touch this one. Okay. So that's me as regards religion. I don't know, but I can't say no. I can't say you're stupid if you do believe in something. I can't. I could never argue. I've never had a theological argument in my life. But now your second question was what?
I was wondering, if you think about not formal religion only, but spirituality, how that is shaped, if you agree to the first question I asked, the way that you view human beings, or what a human being is.
Well, what I've said about my religion, if you'd like to call it that, my religious impulse, it means that every human being I put my eyes on is an occasion for reverence. Life is sacred. Life is sacred. That's it. That's all. What?
No, that was an amazing answer. I'm sorry.
It's not an amazing.
No, it's an amazing answer. Yeah.
Can I give? Thank you. I'll come next to you.
I was wondering, you spoke earlier about, that you were afraid lots of times in doing your work, and I'm curious, not so much about those big fears, the fears of what would happen from your work, but a lot of times I think in life people are held back by, like, the small fears, like that you're not going to be good enough, that you're going to be a failure, that you're...
Well, that's a pretty big fear. That's a pretty big fear.
I'm just
Do you know the writer Olive Schreiner? There's a very great South African woman writer. You should read. She's written a book called The Story of an African Farm, and you must get hold of it and read it, because it's got some very profound insights, and it's also, can you for the Story of an African Farm? You should, because it's got a vein of spirituality in it that's very important. And this writer, Olive Schreiner, used to always end her days when she was a little girl, and then even up to the point before her father died when she was a young woman. And she would go to him every night and say, "Daddy, I promise I'll be better tomorrow." Now, that's a small fear. It's that sense that you're not worthy enough for all that's come your way. Those fears can be as destructive and as demoralizing as, I not only have big fears, but coming out of being very frank about myself and looking at myself very frankly, I'm full of very personal, very small fears as well. I really am. When I said to you, I know I'm not brave. I know I've got no courage. I know I'm not strong. I know these things. And those are small fears compared to the big issues. You know what I mean? That's just me and myself. But they're lasting. They're very, very dangerous, and you've got to deal with them. You've got to deal with them.
So my question was going to be related to that, like, for people who have those, like, that holds them back from maybe the kind of contribution they could make if they were able to get over those fears.
If you can get over those little fears, those small rats, that gnaw away, you know. Yes, very definitely.
Do you have thought? Were there things that helped you to do that? Like even when you go.
Well, I made recourse to the obvious thing when it comes to searching for courage. I became an alcoholic.
Oh.
Yes, I followed in my father's footsteps, and I landed up in a lot of trouble as an alcoholic. And be careful. Be careful. Right up, and then at the age of 50, I saw the light. I saw the light for your benefit. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Yes.
We had a comment in an unrelated question. I watched Cesar Banzi's dead in 2007 at the Hilton Arts Festival.
Oh yes, yes.
Yes,
That's a great arts festival. That I took a play there a couple of times. Yeah.
And that scene where, with the ashes, when they talk about bringing him back from
Yeah.
London, we were sitting with a family who 2 months earlier had sent their 18-year-old son off to Oxford, and that week had flown back with him in an urn.
Oh really?
Spent the morning
My word!
in
What
the
a
hall,
coincidence.
so it was really powerful.
Okay.
And then you spoke about that insidious prejudice. How did you go about stamping that out if you had grains of that from just being indoctrinated in South Africa?
I wonder if I can answer that, because I wonder if I can answer that. How did I deal with prejudice? How did I fight it? What weapons did I have? How did I deal with prejudice? I don't know. I suppose. I think the first thing that is important. Yeah, and I think it most probably starts with that. The fight starts with that. Is to recognize it for what it is. To recognize it as the most insidious of all the evils that can beset a human life. It is the cancer of the soul. It is the cancer of the soul. It will spread through your entire being if you don't recognize it for what it is. The only trouble, of course, is, and this is maybe the real question you're asking, is that you've got to be the surgeon who cuts out the tumor. Well, good luck to you. I don't know. And I've told you, I don't know how I did it, but I reckon the fight starts when you recognize it is evil. Not because people say it's evil, or because the Bible says it's evil, not because the politicians say it's evil, but because something inside yourself says no. That's not right.
What inspires you?
What?
What inspires you to write, and what inspired you back when you were a young writer and now approaching 80?
You. People. People are beautiful. They really are. They're beautiful. And the privilege of being witness to a life is so extraordinary. I mean, a human life is the most advanced flower in the whole universe. You're like a flower.
And when you were young and weren't so wise, what inspired you then?
I don't know. I just love
you wrote
beautiful.
the first
I just love beautiful things, especially beautiful women.
Athol, way up in the back there, there's a lady up there.
Okay.
Those two ladies up there.
Thank you. Yes, my dear.
Ek wil graag hoor. Dit is vir my baie interessant dat u het nou rond 4 uur groot geword.
Ja.
In hierdie hof, ek sou sê, wel minder ideale omstandighede met 'n ma wat glad nie geletterd was en 'n pa wat alkoholist was. En dit is net vir my interessant. Ek wil graag weet hoe het u uitgekom waar u vandag is? Soos as 'n wêreldbekende skrywer, soos was daar een of ander spesifieke draaipunt, hoe het die lewe geloop dat u soos uitgedra is as 'n wêreldbekende skrywer?
Ek kan daai vragie aankoppel met wat die jongeman my gevra het. What about prejudice, if you know prejudice? In that tea room, in the St. George's Park tea room, where I was struggling with this problem of having a father who wasn't a role model and a black servant who was. Coming out of the conflict inside me, because there is a moment in the play which I've constructed in which ek praat nou Engels van grade I have constructed a moment when Sam tries to help Hallie. Hallie's dealing with a terrible problem about his father. He had thought his father was in the hospital and was going to stay there and just be there, and suddenly the telephone, his mother's on the telephone saying your daddy's coming home, and he gets so angry, Hallie, because he doesn't, it's going to ruin everything again. There are going to be fights between the mother and the father, and his father's going to be drunk, and he loves his father, and what does he, you understand the conflict inside that young boy. And he's actually allowing the potential in him to hate his father operate in terms of what he says and the way he's acting. And Sam, the black man, says, Ellie, stop. You mustn't talk about your father like that. Even though he is what he is, you mustn't talk about him. It's your father. And Sam's is magnificently right. But for Hallie at that moment, he scamed her, the shame. Well, he besef wel dat Sam reg is. He understands that Sam is right. And he's so ashamed that he turns on Sam and he spits in Sam's face. Shut up, nigger, kafir, whatever you'd like to call him, whatever ugly word you've got. Just shut up and leave me alone. I'm white, you're black. Shut up. And then Sam reminds him about a moment much earlier on when Hallie was also again lonely and in trouble. Because I had an experience, you see, with my father, which was terribly cauterizing. But because it might help you understand, I don't mind talking about it, because I will talk about it with love, and I hope you receive it that way. Is I was alone in this little tatty boarding house that my mother had, and one night by myself, I forget where the rest of the family was, and Sam was down the stairs in the servant's room, and the telephone rang and I answered it, and it was the bar of the Central Hotel. It was the barman of the Central Hotel to tell me, or to tell the Fugards, that, look here, your father is lying dead drunk on the floor of this hotel, come and fetch him. And he was literally op die vloer. He was literally on the floor, lying there, drunk. Me fetch him, I'm a boy of about 12, I think, 13, 14 at that age. So I go to Sam and I say to Sam, Sam, will you help me fetch my father? So the two of us go to the Central Hotel, and Sam can't go in because he's black. It's a whites only bar. This is apartheid, don't forget. So I have to go in and I have to ask, and my father's lying there, I can see him on the floor, and I have to ask the barman, can our black boy, Master Harold and the boys, can our black boy come in and help me carry my father back home? So the barman says, yes, you can. So Sam comes in and he picks up my father and puts him onto his back. I walk behind Sam carrying my father's crutches. And so we loop ons deur die Hoofstraat. Me following my father, drunk father, on the back of a black man. Nou, dis 'n oomblik van skaamte. That's a moment of shame. That you can never, it burns into you so powerfully, you can never get rid of it. Never. Nothing that I can do can ever erase the memory of that. And it was coming out of that sort of feeling, of that sort of shame, that I spat in Sam's face. And Sam saw what effect it had on me. So one day I come down into the little room where he was living, and he's on his hands and knees on the floor, making something out of 2 pieces of wood and using milli-meal paste as glue and some very thin paper. And I realize he's making a kite. And he says, "Come on, Hallie, let's go fly it." And he takes me up to the top of a hill in the center of Port Elizabeth called the Donkin. And we fly the kite. We fly the kite, and Sam lifts me in that way out of my depression. I'll never forget that moment when I saw that kite up in the sky. And now, how does it happen? There's something that some small little event. Oh yes, I know what it is. Sam turned around and walked away then, just leaving me there with my kite. And so I asked him in the tea room that afternoon, why? Well, he tells me, "Do you remember, Hallie, you were sitting on the bench holding a kite, and then you asked me, 'Sam, why don't you come and sit down here next to me?' And he said, 'Hallie, didn't you know that was a whites-only bench? I couldn't sit with you.'" And that's it. It all comes out of that. Put all of those ingredients into the pot, stir it very well, keep it simmering on the stove for about 12 years, and you end up with Master Harold and the boys. Okay?
We could just take 2 more questions. I know there was one down here, Nate, you had one, and then Levelyn, you'll be the last one.
Yeah, no.
I just comment and then a question. This, the comment is just, for me, a bit ironic to hear you say that you don't consider yourself to be brave, when for me your whole life speaks of courage, not only being
That's your problem, darling, not mine.
Like we really appreciate like the honesty and
Thank you.
That for me is in itself already bravery, and also Greg's anecdote, like the will to do what is right. But then my question is just very general and very difficult, but I'm just wondering, since you have the opportunity, what do you think is your greatest lesson that you have learned in life? I know that's pretty
No, it's not really. I think one of the most important things that you can hold in your heart, provided you've been living, you've been trying to live a life decently, is hope. Hope is to believe that tomorrow can be better than today.
Levelyn?
I just actually wanted to just commend you and comment on something.
Let me go up to you. Yes.
When you started out talking, and you said, I'm so proud of you guys, you're the generation, and the future belongs to you, whatever. I think a lot of the times a lot of us hear that when, famous people come, oh, you're the generation and whatever. And I know that, I'm Nigerian, but I've grown up in South Africa. And when we did Busman and Vienna in grade 11, that was the first time that I started to, think about the complication that is South Africa, and essentially that is a part of me. And I read a book by Rian Malan, My Traitor's Heart, and I read his story, and then I started, reading more books about South African, not so much South African history, but people that have lived in South Africa and their life stories. And I really just wanted to say that I think a lot of why you've been successful, and I think a lot of why South Africa is where we are today, is because there are people like you, and there's writers that are willing to write honestly about what they feel and what they are and about what we are. And I know for me as a Nigerian, I mean, I would kill to see the day where, you know, an Igbo person and a Yoruba person and a Hausa person can really, really sit properly together like we're sitting now, you know, and be honest about certain things without chopping off each other's hands or something like that. And I think it's the same thing that's the key for us to keep going for it as a country, as South Africa, to maintain that honesty and to be able to say, you know what, I really hate BEE or whatever, but to be able to sit and be honest about things and acknowledge that, look, this is the complication that is South Africa, and still love it. And it's what you said now earlier. I think when you're talking about Usman and Diana, that when Usman said, look, you know, we're rubbish and everything about us is rubbish, and it's that moment that has always stuck with me about, you know, our country is sort of rubbish, but we can't help but, you know, love it, because that's all we have, and that's what we are. Yeah. So thank you.
She's given the closing speech. Truly. But just a nice thing. She comes from Nigeria. I did a play recently called The Train Driver, and one of the things on the stage was a shack. And guess who was sitting in the shack with me one afternoon, and we had our picture taken? Wodi Shoyinka.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Well, if you give somebody your email address, I'll send you a copy of the picture. Okay. He was coming, visiting the country, and we know each other way, way back when he first went into exile. You know, when he got the Nobel Prize. And he was in the theatre, and so we sat together in the shack, which was kind of symbolic actually of all that you've just been saying. Thank you very much. Okay.
Could I connect to that?
You can talk from upstairs.
Oh, okay.
You'll get a chance.
Right.
Alpha, come on back down.
Dr. Fugard, thank you so much for coming. I know on the day when we had lunch with you, I kind of felt like a politician, because in the back of my mind I knew that we needed to ask you, if you're going to come and speak to students. But we had to sit through the 1 hour lunch and talk about, I spoke about the road to Mecca, because that's the one play that we did at school and that I remember so well. And we spoke about South Africa, but the main reason we actually went was to ask if we could have this occasion. So I felt like such a traitor sitting there, and so bad. But at the end of the day...
Oh, she doesn't, she can't stop there. She kept it up by email, by email, by email. She's a persistent young lady.
Yeah. Okay, but Dr. Fugard, thank you so much for coming and for agreeing to come and for being so honest with us as students as well, about South Africa, about your works, about your life, about your family, about the good meals at Stias, because I know we can all concur and agree on that point. And then the other people I would like to thank, as well as Dr. Greg Ricks as well, or Greg as we know him, for making the connection, getting Professor Khaya to agree for us to come over and all those kinds of things. Greg, you always speak about how students have so much power, and I know Peter, in his absence, not here today, he also always just encourages me every time we talk, and he's like, as a student with that student number, you have so much power when you write an email, because when I have to send an email, people see my signature and they go, okay, next. Okay, let's reply to this. Okay, this looks interesting. But I've really learned that as students we have so much power when we just ask, because one, we have nothing to lose because we have nothing. We only have an intellectual capacity and ourselves and then our families, and that's all that we come with. And people can only say yes or no, and that's one of the things that I've learned in my time here at Stellenbosch University. The other person I also want to thank is Cheryl Cornelissen for doing all the logistics, the arrangements, getting people together, organizing things with the blow coma and all those kinds of things. I also want to thank Timothy Tennyson for going and collecting Dr. Fugard as well, and for being so, amped about this whole process. Thanks so much, Tim. The other people we also want to thank is the Nielsen Cinema, and just for their cooperation and getting everything together here for us. I think we can really start using the space so much more, Anina, in the future. To the Live and Learn community, you guys are so amazing. Thank you so much for coming and responding so in your numbers, and also to Elian, who just couldn't keep the secret anymore and just let it out to everybody. Thank you so much for that as well. To the SRC, Anina, this has been one of the an example of good collaboration between Live and Learn and your SRC as well, and your team, and just working together. Thank you so much. I know that this is the start of so many more things to come, because you guys are so ambitious. I'm very proud of you guys as the leadership of this university now, because I know that you guys dream big and that you guys are going to go really far in terms of what you're doing. To the Blaukamer for the refreshments that they've also provided for us. We're going to be, after this we will be moving up there, and we're going to have some drinks and some eats, and you'll also be able to have a chance to chat to Dr. Fugard over there. And then to Professor Hendrik Geyer at STIAS, I think I thanked him already for making this opportunity available and for allowing Dr. Fugard to come and spend some time with us. And to everybody for coming, thank you so much. I know without you guys this wouldn't have been possible. The questions, the debates, and all those kinds of things that have come out of there.
Wonderful.
And also for taking some time out of your study program. I know a lot of you guys are really just sitting here on the edges. You guys have to be in the library, but yet you've come. Thank you very much.
Good luck on your exam. So upstairs in the Blaukamer that we